Beezy wasted no time in asserting her dominance, claiming everything that had once belonged to Mogisela as her own. She wore Mogisela's clothes, fine silks, and elegant dresses that had once accentuated the gentle beauty of the woman who had been loved by all. Now on Beezy, they looked grotesque, as if the fabric itself resisted being worn by someone so full of malice. She would sit in Mogisela's favorite chair, the plush armchair by the window where Mogisela had often sat, watching her children play in the garden. Beezy would drape herself there, her legs crossed, a smug smile on her lips, as if daring anyone to challenge her right to sit in the place of the woman she had destroyed.
I hope you are enjoying the story. Please, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified anytime I upload new video. Now let's continue the story.
But it wasn't enough for Beezy to simply take over the house. Her greed knew no bounds. The wealth and status that had once belonged to the Agelo family now became her obsession. She began siphoning money from Mr. Agelo's business accounts, diverting funds meant for the family's livelihood and his company's growth into her personal accounts. With that money, she bought herself expensive jewelry, rings encrusted with diamonds, heavy gold necklaces, and delicate bracelets that glittered in the light. She adorned herself like royalty, oblivious to the fact that her newfound luxury came at the cost of others. While Beezy indulged in her extravagant lifestyle, Kalapo and Dara were forced to wear rags. Their clothes, once clean and neatly pressed by the house staff, now hung loose and dirty on their small frames. Beezy had fired most of the household staff, deeming them unnecessary. The few who remained were those who feared her too much to leave, servants who had seen what Beezy was capable of and chose obedience over defiance. These staff members were no allies to Kalapo and Dara. They kept their heads down and did as they were told, ensuring that the children remained isolated and without help. As the months dragged on, the true cost of Beezy's reign became more apparent. Her greed, once carefully hidden, began to seep out for all to see. She drained Mr. Agelo's business accounts at an alarming rate, siphoning off money faster than the company could earn it. At first, the effects were subtle, but soon, the cracks in the empire Mr. Agelo had worked so hard to build and began to show. His once thriving business started to falter. Bills went unpaid, clients were lost, and employees once loyal and dedicated began to leave in droves as rumors of financial instability spread. Meanwhile, Mr. Agelo, the one strong man who had been a pillar of his community, was fading away. Beezy's control over him had extended far beyond just his emotions. It had started to take a toll on his body and mind. He grew weaker with each passing day, his health deteriorating in ways no doctor could explain. His once sharp mind, which had built a business empire from the ground up, was now dulled by Beezy's constant manipulation. He became a mere puppet, his strings pulled by the woman who had once been his maid. His eyes, once full of life and love for his children, were now vacant, his spirit broken under the weight of Beezy's relentless greed. The man who had once commanded respect wherever he went was now a shadow of himself, barely able to make decisions for his business, much less protect his children from the horrors unfolding in their home. Kalapo and Dara watched helplessly as their father crumbled before their eyes, slipping further away with each passing day. They no longer recognized the man who had once held them close, who had once been their protector. He had become a ghost, lost to them in every way that mattered. Beezy's control, once so absolute, began to show signs of weakness. Her greed had become too evident, her cruelty too public to ignore. Neighbors and business associates, who had once revered Mr. Agelo and his family, began to talk. They whispered about the strange changes in the household, about the once vibrant family that had now fallen into ruin. Some said that Bizi was a curse on the Agelo name, that her very presence had brought misfortune upon the family. Others speculated that Mr. Agelo had been bewitched, that no man could fall so deeply under a woman's spell without some dark magic being involved. And yet, despite the growing suspicion, no one dared confront Bizi directly. Her temper had become legendary, and her influence over Mr. Agelo was undeniable. She had positioned herself as the gatekeeper to the Agelo family, controlling who could enter their home, who could speak to her husband, and what information could leave the household. Bizi, it seemed, was untouchable. But even as she basked in the glory of her new status, the cracks in her empire continued to grow. The business, once a symbol of Mr. Agelo's hard work and integrity, was teetering on the edge of collapse. The wealth she had stolen so greedily was dwindling, and with it, her grip on power. Bizi's reign, built on a foundation of lies, deceit, and cruelty, was slowly unraveling. And it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down around her. One fateful evening, as the wind howled through the cracks in the windows and rain lashed violently against the walls, Kalapo and Dara sat huddled together on the edge of their bed. The storm outside nothing compared to the turmoil they felt within. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows across the walls, but their focus was on the small photograph they held between them. It was an old picture of their mother, Mogisela, taken during one of her happiest moments, her radiant smile lighting up the frame. The photograph had become their only link to the past, the only reminder of a time when love filled their home instead of fear. They had hidden it carefully under the mattress, a small act of rebellion against the woman who had stolen their peace. Tears welled up in Dara's eyes as she traced the edges of the photo, her tiny fingers trembling. "I miss her," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the storm. Kalapo, though older and trying to be strong, felt the weight of grief pressing down on him too. "I miss her too," he murmured, his voice cracking with emotion. They sat in silence, their heads bowed in sorrow, their tears mixing with the distant roar of thunder outside.
I hope you are enjoying the story. Please, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified anytime I upload new video. Now let's continue the story.
Suddenly, the door flew open with a deafening crash, causing them both to jump. There, silhouetted by the dim hallway light, stood Bizi, her eyes gleaming with a fury that seemed to match the storm outside. The thunder rumbled in the distance, but it was nothing compared to the rage emanating from her as she stalked into the room. Her face, usually masked with a cold sneer, was now twisted into something far more terrifying. Hatred, pure and raw. "You dare sit here, crying for her?" Bizi's voice was sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. "Your mother is gone. She's not coming back, and you'd better get used to it." Her words were filled with venom, each syllable laced with the bitter envy that had consumed her heart. She took a menacing step forward, and the children instinctively recoiled, clutching the photograph tightly. But Bizi's eyes were locked on that image, that one remaining piece of Mogisela that still lingered in the house, reminder of everything Bizi could never truly erase. With lightning speed, she lunged forward, ripping the photograph from Dara's trembling hands. "No!" Bizi stood over them, holding the photograph like a trophy, her lips curling into a cruel smile. Without hesitation, she began tearing it apart, piece by piece. The sound of the photo being shredded was agonizing, like the final severing of a bond the children weren't ready to let go of. Kalapo's eyes widened in disbelief as he watched his mother's image, her face, her smile, her warmth, disappear before his eyes, reduced to nothing more than tattered pieces of paper falling to the floor. "You will forget her," Bizi spat, her voice harsh and commanding. "I am in charge now. I am your mother. The words echoed in the small room, but they only deepened the children's pain. The reality of their situation, the absolute control Beezy now wielded, hit them like a wave. Dara sobbed openly, her small shoulders shaking with grief, while Kalapo's hands clenched into fists at his sides. His heart raced, fury and helplessness colliding within him. He had stayed quiet for too long, and endured Beezy's cruelty for too long, but no more. With a surge of anger, Kalapo bolted from the room, his legs carrying him down the hallway toward his father's door. He pounded on his father's door, his fists bruised and his voice hoarse from shouting, "Father! Father, please! Ani Beezy is—" The door swung open, but it was not Mr. Agilo who stood there. Instead, Beezy appeared again, her face twisted into a cruel smirk. She pushed Kalapo back with a strength that belied her appearance, her touch cold and unforgiving. "Your father is sleeping," she sneered, her voice laced with a mockingly sympathetic tone. "And he won't be waking up." The words were a chilling blow, a final confirmation of a dreadful truth that Kalapo had been trying to deny. The realization struck Kalapo like a physical blow. His father, who had once been his protector, his guide, and the anchor of their family, was now lost to them forever. The man who had been the cornerstone of their lives was now a mere ghost, consumed by the darkness Beezy had wrought. The finality of Beezy's statement left Kalapo feeling hollow and desolate. The last vestige of hope, the belief that somehow their father might still save them, was crushed beneath the weight of her words. The storm outside seemed to reflect the storm within Kalapo's heart, a turbulent sea of grief and despair as he stood there, powerless, knowing that his family was now irrevocably shattered. The months passed, and with each day, Beezy's pregnancy grew heavier, more ominous, yet no sign of delivery came. 11 long months had dragged on, and what had initially brought her pride and confidence now filled her with dread. The weight of the unborn child inside her became unbearable, as though something far more sinister than life was growing within her. The house, once dominated by her cruel presence, now echoed with fear and tension. Even Beezy, who had once commanded everything with an iron fist, seemed smaller, her once menacing aura fading under the strain of her mysterious condition. Mr. Agilo, who had long been under her control, watched helplessly as Beezy's condition worsened. He consulted doctor after doctor, each one more perplexed than the last. They ran tests, performed scans, but the baby refused to come. No amount of medical expertise could explain why the pregnancy had gone on for so long without signs of labor. The once vibrant and powerful woman was now reduced to a shell, her skin pale, and her face etched with pain. As Beezy's condition grew more desperate, so did Mr. Agilo's search for a solution. He traveled far and wide, seeking help from traditional healers, herbalists, and spiritual leaders, but each effort ended in failure. No one could provide answers, and the baby remained locked inside her womb, a growing curse that refused to be born. Then, one fateful day, a pastor came to visit the Agilo household. He was a man known for his deep faith and powerful prayers. When he entered the house, it was as if a weight had lifted, and the dark, suffocating atmosphere that had plagued the home for months began to lighten. He observed Beezy for a moment before speaking softly but firmly to Mr. Agilo. "There is more to this than meets the eye," the pastor said, his voice filled with certainty. "This is not a medical problem. It is a spiritual one. She has done something in the past, something that she has not confessed. Until she reveals the truth, she will not be able to deliver this child." The room fell silent. Beezy, lying on the bed, looked up at the pastor with wide eyes, fear flickering in their depths. She had spent months hiding behind her lies, manipulating those around her, believing she had escaped the consequences of her actions. But now, the walls of her deceit were closing in. "Confess," the pastor urged, his voice unwavering. "If you want to live, if you want to save this child, you must confess everything." Trembling, Beezy began to speak. The words came slowly at first, as though they were being ripped from her soul, but soon the floodgates opened and the truth spilled out. She confessed to everything. She revealed how she had poisoned Mrs. Mogisela Agelo, how she had watched her die in agony without remorse. She admitted to casting dark spells over Mr. Agelo, bewitching him and manipulating his grief so that he would marry her. She spoke of the cruelty she had inflicted upon Kalapo and Dara, how she had taken pleasure in their suffering. Her confessions were like a dark cloud lifting from the house, each word punctuated by the crackle of lightning from the storm outside. The room seemed to breathe again, as though the very walls had been waiting for this moment of reckoning. As Beezy finished her confessions, the pastor prayed over her, his hands raised high as he asked for divine mercy. His voice was powerful, filled with the authority of a man who knew that justice was being served. Beezy's body shook with each word, as though the weight of her sins was physically pulling her down. Then, something strange happened. For the first time in months, Beezy felt the stirrings of labor. The baby that had refused to come now seemed ready, as though the truth had unlocked whatever dark force had been holding it back. Relief spread across Beezy's face, but it was fleeting. As she stood, preparing to make her way to the tighter room where the midwives waited, a sudden wave of pain shot through her body. She collapsed in the hallway, her strength draining rapidly. Her breath came in short, panicked gasps, and her vision blurred as darkness closed in. "Help!" Mr. Agelo shouted, rushing to her side. But it was too late. Beezy's life ebbed away as swiftly as the child she had carried for so long. Her final breath came in a shallow whisper, and with it, the last remnants of her power and influence disappeared.
I hope you are enjoying the story. Please, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified anytime I upload new video. Now let's continue the story.
The curse that had plagued the Agelo family was lifted, and in her death, they were finally free. Kalapo and Dara, standing in the doorway, watched in silence. There was no joy in the moment, only the bittersweet relief that came with the end of their nightmare. Their father, who had been lost to them for so long, collapsed in tears, finally released from the spell that had bound him. And as the storm outside began to die down, the house seemed to breathe once more. The darkness that had plagued it for so long was gone, and in its place, there was hope. When the news of Beezy's death spread through the Agelo household, there was no wailing, no tearful goodbyes. The air, thick with tension for so long, was now filled with an eerie, unsettling silence. It was as if the entire house took a collective breath, as though the walls themselves sighed in relief. The storm that had hovered over the once happy home had finally passed, leaving behind a strange calm. There was no room for mourning. Beezy's death did not feel like a loss. It felt like an ending that had been long overdue. But the damage had already been done. His once thriving business, which had stood as a symbol of his hard work and success, was in ruins. Beezy had drained the accounts, spending lavishly on herself while the company crumbled. Customers had lost trust, employees had been mistreated or dismissed, and partnerships had dissolved. What had taken years to build had been destroyed in mere months. Worse still was the distance that had grown between Mr. Agelo and his children. Kalapo and Dara, now older, carried the scars of their suffering. They had endured Beezy's cruelty, watching as their father, their once strong protector, became a shadow of the man they had known. The bond they once shared had been strained to the point of breaking, and though they loved their father, they could not forget how he had abandoned them in their time of need, bewitched by the woman who had made their lives a living hell. Yet, as days turned into weeks, something remarkable began to happen. Kalapo and Dara, despite their pain, did not turn away from their father. They could have walked away, left the remnants of their shattered home behind, but they didn't. Instead, they stood by his side, determined to help him rebuild what Bizi had destroyed. Their grief had made them wiser, their suffering had made them stronger. They understood now that their father, too, had been a victim, ensnared by Bizi's manipulation, just as they had been. Piece by piece, they began to rebuild their lives. It wasn't easy. The Agelo family, once admired and respected in the community, now had to face the harsh judgment of those who had watched their fall from grace. The whispers of how Mr. Agelo had married the maid so soon after Mogisela's death still lingered in the air, and the shame weighed heavily on him. But Kalapo and Dara, with the resilience that only hardship can breed, supported their father, reminding him that they were still a family and that, together, they could reclaim what had been lost. The once great Agelo family would never be the same. The golden years of their past were gone, and the legacy that Mogisela had built with her grace and kindness was forever tarnished by the tragedy that had unfolded within their home. But in the end, the nightmare of Bizi's tyranny was over. There was no more fear, no more cruelty, and no more dark secrets lurking in the shadows. As the seasons changed and the years went by, the Agelo family found a new kind of strength. It wasn't the effortless joy they had once known, but it was something deeper, more hard-earned. They learned to live with their scars, to find peace in the aftermath of the storm. And in that quiet, broken place, they began to heal.
I hope you are enjoying the story. Please, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified anytime I upload new video. Now let's continue the story.
Agelo, now freed from the suffocating grip of Bizi's manipulation, set out on a determined path to rebuild both his life and the legacy he had once worked so hard to create. The scars from his ordeal were deep, but his resolve was stronger. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he was determined to reclaim all that had been lost. The first step was to repair the relationships that had suffered during Bizi's reign of terror, especially with the staff at his company who had remained loyal despite the chaos. His most faithful employees had stood by, quietly witnessing the destruction that Bizi had wrought, powerless to intervene under the weight of Agelo's misguided trust in her. Now, as they sat before him in the boardroom, their faces a mixture of relief and concern, Agelo poured out his heart in apology. He spoke of the darkness that had clouded his judgment, how Bizi's spell had turned him into someone unrecognizable, and how he had failed them all. He begged for their forgiveness, acknowledging the rash decisions he had made, decisions that had allowed Bizi to bleed the company dry. "She deceived me," Agelo said, his voice heavy with regret. "I was blind to the truth, and in my blindness, I hurt all of you. I understand if trust will take time to rebuild, but I am asking for a chance to make things right." The room remained silent for a moment, but then one by one, the staff members who had once doubted Agelo's leadership began to nod. They had seen his fall, but they also knew the man he had been before Bizi entered their lives. Slowly, words of forgiveness began to fill the room. One of his most trusted employees, Mr. Bamadil, stood up and said, "Sir, we know it wasn't really you. Bizi had her claws in deep, but now that you've returned, we're with you. We'll do whatever it takes to restore this company to its former glory." Agelo's heart swelled with gratitude. He encouraged them all to unite, to set aside the past and focus on the future. The rebuilding of the business would be a collective effort, but Agilo promised to lead with transparency and fairness, unlike the hollow decisions made under Beezy's influence. Slowly, the once thriving company began to rise again, brick by brick, with Agilo and his loyal team steering it back to prosperity. Back at home, Agilo turned his attention to his most precious responsibility, his children Kalapo and Dara. They had suffered in silence for too long, subjected to Beezy's cruelty, while their father was lost in a haze of manipulation. Agilo knew he had to make amends, not only through words, but through actions. He made a point to be more present in their lives, ensuring that they no longer felt abandoned or neglected. He sought the advice of trusted friends and counselors on how best to rebuild his relationship with Kalapo and Dara, who had grown wary and withdrawn during Beezy's tyranny. In his research, Agilo learned about the importance of emotional healing, and he was determined to create a home environment where his children felt safe, loved, and free to express themselves. Agilo also took his time in hiring new staff for the household, determined to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. This time, he didn't rush the process. He consulted with professionals and sought out individuals with impeccable records and glowing recommendations. The new house helps were not only competent but also kind, chosen for their ability to create a nurturing environment for Kalapo and Dara. Slowly, the house that had once echoed with Beezy's harsh orders and manipulative games was filled with laughter once more. Kalapo and Dara began to smile again, their spirits lifting as the weight of the past was replaced with hope for the future. They were children again, running through the halls, playing in the garden, and enjoying the simple pleasures that had been denied them for too long. As the months passed, the Agilo family found their rhythm once more. Kalapo and Dara grew closer to their father, not just out of necessity, but out of genuine love and trust. They were no longer afraid of shadows or raised voices. They had their father back, and with him came the return of warmth and security. Agilo, having learned from his painful experience, ensured that his home and business were now built on strong foundations, those of trust, integrity, and love. The scars of the past were still there, but they were no longer wounds. They had healed into reminders of lessons learned. Agilo had been tested, and though he had fallen, he had risen again, stronger and more resolute than before. As the Agilo family moved forward, they did so with a renewed sense of purpose. Life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs to shape. The dark days of Beezy's reign had ended, and in their place came new beginnings filled with hope, healing, and a future they could believe in.
I hope you are enjoying the story. Please, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so that you will be notified anytime I upload new video. Now let's continue the story.
In the end, Beezy's insatiable greed and poisonous envy had led her to a tragic downfall, one that she could never have anticipated. She had imagined herself as the mistress of the Agilo household, a queen in a kingdom she had stolen. Yet, what Beezy failed to understand was that no empire built on deceit and malice can stand the test of time. The seeds of her evil had taken root, but they bore nothing but destruction. The same hands that had plotted against Mrs. Mogisela, that had seduced and manipulated Mr. Agilo, now held nothing but the weight of her misdeeds, a weight too heavy for her to carry. Beezy believed she could take what wasn't hers, but in the end, it was the very darkness she harbored that consumed her. Her jealousy had blinded her to the truth that you cannot build happiness on the misery of others. The Agilo family, though battered and scarred by her actions, survived her storm. They emerged from the ruins of their past, not whole but still standing. While Beezy's name faded into nothingness, a forgotten whisper, she became a cautionary tale, a dark memory erased from their hearts, her legacy one of destruction rather than triumph. This story serves as a powerful reminder that everything in life, whether good or evil, has an end. Bizi's reign of terror had a beginning, but it was destined to unravel. No matter how long evil persists, it cannot last forever. The weight of wickedness is unsustainable, and in the end, it collapses under its own cruelty. Bizi's undoing was not just a personal failure, it was the natural consequence of her moral decay. She sought to destroy others, but in the process, she destroyed herself. There is also a deeper lesson in the choices we make. Life is full of decisions, some small and others that change the course of our lives. It is in these moments of decision-making that we must pause and seek divine guidance. Had Mr. Angelo taken time to sincerely pray and ask for God's direction before giving his heart to Bizi, perhaps he would have seen her for what she truly was, a wolf in sheep's clothing. The lesson here is clear. When faced with crucial decisions, especially those that affect our families and our futures, we must turn to God for wisdom and clarity. No decision made in haste or desperation can ever lead to lasting peace. Furthermore, this story teaches us the importance of vigilance. Those we allow into our homes and lives, especially those in positions of trust like maids or employees, can either help us build or quietly tear us apart. Bizi's betrayal came from within the very walls of the Angelo home, a stark reminder that not all who smile at us wish us well. As we navigate our lives and trust others with our success and happiness, we must remain watchful. A discerning eye and a prayerful heart can prevent the kind of destruction Bizi brought into the Angelo family. Trust is valuable, but it must be earned, and not everyone is worthy of it. In the end, the Angelo family's journey is one of survival, of learning from pain and rebuilding from the ashes of betrayal. Their scars tell a story of endurance, of rising above the worst life could throw at them. And Bizi, she is a reminder that envy, greed, and malice, no matter how powerful they seem in the moment, are always doomed to fail.
Thanks for watching today's story. I believe you enjoyed every bit of it all. Now I want you to do me one favor. Subscribe to this channel, like, and turn on the notification bell if you have not done so that whenever I release my next video, you will be notified immediately. See you soon.